Coming up on The World Today. Russia burns off large amounts of natural gas as Europe's energy bills skyrocket. The UK to announce further support next month for consumers struggling with energy bills. Plus, Moderna is suing Pfizer and BioNTech for patent infringement in the development of the first COVID-19 vaccine. A warm welcome to you. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. As Europe's energy costs skyrocket, Russia is burning off large amounts of natural gas. According to one analysis, they say the plant near the border with Finland is burning an estimated $10 million, £8.4 million worth of gas every day. Experts say the gas would previously have been exported to Germany. Germany's ambassador to the UK told local news that Russia was burning the gas because they couldn't sell it elsewhere. Scientists are concerned about the large volumes of carbon dioxide and soot it is creating, which could exacerbate the melting of Arctic ice. The analysis by Rystad Energy indicates that around 4.34 million cubic meters of gas are being burned by the flare every day. This is coming as a new liquefied natural gas LNG plant at Portovaya, northwest of St. Petersburg. The first signs that something was awry came from Finnish citizens over the nearby border who spotted a large flame on the horizon earlier this summer. Portovaya is located close to the compressor station at the start of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which carries gas under the sea to Germany. Supplies through the pipeline have been curtailed since mid-July, with the Russians blaming technical issues for the restriction. Germany says it was purely a political move following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But since June, researchers have noted a significant increase in heat emanating from the facility, thought to be from gas flaring, the burning of natural gas. And let's hear from an analyst from Rystad Energy Consultancy based in Norway, describing it as an environmental disaster, and estimated the amount of gas being burned off into the atmosphere was equivalent to about 0.5% of daily EU needs. The flare can be seen in satellite images of Portovaya, the site of a compressor station for Nord Stream Gas 1. Professor of Sustainable Energy Systems at Lund University in Lappeenranta said that exact flaring volume levels are hard to quantify, but are believed to be at levels around 4.34 million cubic meters per day.
We don't know why there is a large amount of gas flaring in close to Finnish border. By the Russians, it is on the site where the Nord Stream gas pipeline to Germany is starting, but it is also a place where the Russians have built a LNG plant to deliver LNG, and that plant was supposed to open this spring, and so it is probably operating, but due to the war in Ukraine, there is very little information about what is actually happening there. So we can only speculate that right now there is some technical difficulties either involved with Nord Stream or with this LNG station. So basically they are burning somewhere in Western money, somewhere about €1,000 per hour, and they have been doing that for a couple months. So it is a big amount of money. Of course, for natural gas producer, then they might think that, okay, this is still not that much, but for normal people, that is a quite large amount of money.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has begun trying to resume operations at 2 reactors at the Russian-held Zaparisia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine. According to regional governor Alexander Storuk, The plant's 6 reactors working at 10% capacity, while the 5th reactor is in the process of resuming operations. In televised comments, he said the technicians worked and restored electricity supply, and currently the 6th block is at 10% capacity. The 5th block is, according to their information, the process of being restored. VOA's Anna Chenikova joins me now from Kiev with more on the latest. Hi, Anna. It's good to see you. Let's talk about Ukraine's state's nuclear power company saying the Zaparisia plant has been reconnected to the country's energy grid. Kyiv and Moscow have been trading blame over the disruption, accusing one another of shelling. What's been going on there so far?
Good evening. Yes, finally, the Zaparisia power plant is back to the Ukrainian grid, the energy, and this is a good news for today, because of course it was a very dangerous situation, because this was the first time in the history of this plant that it was disconnected completely from the grid, and of course it could. So if we just imagine, in case the generators did not switch off, this would have been a huge catastrophe, and it's not going to be only be a very bad catastrophe for Ukraine itself, but for the whole Europe, and maybe even more areas. It would only depend on the wind flow. So today we hear a lot about Russia, how Russia accuses Ukraine in shellings. However, Ukrainian military confirmed couple of times again today, and I mean just every day they continue to repeat that they never shell the plant, and this is also confirmed by the international experts who analyze what kind of shelling is happening, because local government and locals who live there, and the workers of the plant, Ukrainian workers who remain there, the company Energoatom, they also confirmed that the shelling is happening with very short time between the outcome and income. So this basically proves that it's more likely that it's Russian forces. And again, international society repeating also all the time that Russian forces should stop shelling and should stop occupying the plant, should leave the plant to make it safer for everyone. So we do not have any official confirmation from independent sources that Ukraine shall. However, we have certain confirmations of the shellings conducted by Russian side. For the moment, this area remains under shelling, unfortunately. Both Zaparisia region, and Enerhodar city in particular, where the plant is located. And also the satellite images show that there is a huge fire next to the plant. The forest is on fire, and this also was happened due to the Russian shelling. So we will hope that this not gonna create any additional difficulties, and we hope that International Atomic Agency will be actually able to come and to have their analysis on the site as well.
Indeed, to inspect what's going on. Well, also, Anna, this week marked the 6-month point of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine since February 24 start. It was also this week Ukraine's independence. What's been the mood so far? I mean, this is a situation where thousands of people have been displaced from homes, cities destroyed.
Yeah, we should look at this from, I think 2 sides. Of course, there are a lot of people who lost their homes, a lot of people who had to move to other parts of the country as internally displaced people, and of course there are a lot of people who died. According to the Ukrainian general staff, around 9,000 people, Ukrainian soldiers, if we talk about military, have already died in this war. And of course, it's a huge amount. And for Ukraine, it's for Ukraine, it's very big amount, because Ukraine has never been in war before the 2014, after the Second World War. So for us, for the nation, it's definitely a huge amount and big tragedy. But we should also look at this from the different side of, as you ask about the mood. The mood of people is quite positive, and I should say that on the 24th of August, when the Independence Day was in Ukraine, government asked people to be more careful and to be more attentive to the air raid sirens, and maybe not to be outside for too long. However, Ukrainians were all around the city of Kiev, and the main street was full of people. It's still going on, the exposition of Russian damaged equipment on the main street, and a lot of people visited this exposition on the 24th of August. So people are, I think that if we compare to Ukrainians on the 24th of February and now, half a year into the war, people definitely are not afraid, and people definitely are not as scared as they were on the 24th of February. Most of people are back home. And I think that Ukrainians pretty much, they're pretty much confident in the victory of their armed forces. This is if we talk about, the general feeling, and it was also an official report by the agency that was studying the people's reactions and people's ideas about how all this going, and 80%, even more than 80% of Ukrainians said that they see the victory is coming. So this is basically the mood, I think. And but of course, tragedy is in the air, and war is definitely in the air, even in the city of Kiev, which is not under the shelling at the moment, and is more or less, I should say, safer than if, for example, we talk about Donbas or Kherson region.
It's Anna Chernikova, always a pleasure. Thanks for that update, and continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Kyiv residents were alarmed by possible radiation fallout this morning, the day after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the world narrowly avoided a radiation disaster as electricity to Ukraine's Zaparisia nuclear power plant was cut for hours due to Russian shelling in the area. Mr. Zelensky said Russian shelling on Thursday sparked fires in the ash pit of a nearby coal power station that disconnected the reactor complex, Europe's largest such facility, from power grid. A Russian official said Ukraine was to blame. Backup diesel generators ensured power plant a supply that is vital for cooling and safety systems at the plant, Zelensky said. Kyiv residents polled by local media said they were mostly worried about nuclear threats rather than blackout and temporary power shortages. A resident by name Natalia said that knowing our neighbor, knowing what it is capable of, we understand that there can be different consequences of what is happening there now. That is why everyone is afraid. We are not worried about blackouts, but that the ecological situation may change. Russia's defense ministry today said that its forces had destroyed a US-made M777 howitzer, which it said Ukraine had used to shell the Russian-controlled Zaparisia nuclear plant. In its daily briefing, the defense ministry said that the howitzer had been destroyed west of the town of Maganet in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. Local media could not immediately verify the report. The Zaparisia nuclear plant, Europe's largest, was captured by Russian forces in March. It remains near the front line and has repeatedly come under fire in recent weeks. Meanwhile, European Union energy ministers will convene for an urgent meeting as soon as possible to discuss the energy crisis backed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Approved by the European Commission chief Ursula von der Leyen, the move comes as the 27-nation bloc is trying to shed dependence on supplies of Russian oil and gas. The Czech Republic currently holds the rotating presidency of the EU, and it has already scheduled a regular meeting of the energy ministers for October. Josef Sekela, the country's industry minister, warned separately today that the bloc was in an energy war with Russia, which he said was damaging the whole European Union. Well, for more on the exacerbating energy worries, Deutsche Welle correspondent Lars Holter joins us now from Berlin. Hi, Lars. Tell us the latest and what, all this means for the rest of Europe.
Yeah, it's a big story here. We're talking about the power plant in Zaparisia that has been occupied by Russian troops since March. It has still remained online, though, but it has also repeatedly been damaged by shelling from Russian troops. It damaged power lines. We have some damaged infrastructure, but 2 out of the 6 reactors were actually still functioning this entire time. And that is until now, as it had to be taken off the grid for the first time ever. Now, the problem that raises for Ukraine is that Zaporizhzhia is the single biggest power supplier for the country. And now, of course, that raises a very simple question. How do you keep the lights on in the country? As for the rest of Europe and other countries in general, it also raises questions because this entire situation shines a light again on nuclear energy and its risk. The world, of course, hasn't forgotten about Chernobyl. That was also, of course, in Ukraine when it was still the Soviet Union. An accident in Zaporizhzhia, we are told by experts, could be even worse than what happened in Chernobyl because it's a larger power plant. And that, of course, would pose a huge threat to the whole continent here. We would be expecting a nuclear cloud, radiation, pollution, of course, not only for years, but potentially for decades. Now, that situation, of course, clearly shows why Germany is so hesitant to revive its nuclear reactors here. Germany, of course, itself being in an energy crisis after Russia has cut supplies. Germany is eager to replace Russian deliveries with coal rather than nuclear, even though we know, of course, that coal comes with its own set of problems and has huge environmental problems that exacerbate climate change. But it just still seems to be a safer option still than relying once again on nuclear energy.
And Lars, with Russia burning off large amounts of natural gas, that definitely affects Germany more. So, I mean, coal is not good. Nuclear is not safe either. Germany is looking into new technologies, live hydrogen. This week, a major agreement was signed between Germany and Canada. Tell us more.
Yes, and that is at an interesting moment now because, as I just mentioned, coal is not really what you want to keep alive for much longer because it comes with its own set of problems. But nuclear power now is also not where you want to go. And now Germany is looking for alternatives, and hydrogen came up as a big alternative. Now, we had a 3-day trip here with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his economy minister Robert Habeck for top-level talks in Canada. And they met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau there. And I just want to quote him, Trudeau saying, "We cannot as a world continue to rely on authoritarian countries that will weaponize energy policy as Russia is," end quote. So what he's essentially saying is, yes, we do need to forge new partnerships. And of course, when it comes to energy, not only new partnerships, but we have to be looking into new technologies. And yeah, hydrogen is something that is big in Canada already. Canada produces massive amounts of it in Newfoundland, that is, and that can be shipped to Germany and to other countries, and it can replace coal, gas, and oil. And mostly that is, of course, in industrial settings, but also in transportation. Think hydrogen-powered cars.
So, Laz, what's next for Germany? Winter's approaching, and also for other countries for that matter. Is there a new push to find alternative energy solutions?
Yes, there is. Really everywhere you're looking. Hydrogen being the latest solution here now, especially in that deal with Canada, because it can be produced in a green way using wind power for the process. But of course, there's other things changing in Germany as well. Germany, unfortunately, much like some other countries as well, Germany has not invested as much into renewables over the last decade as they should have. And that's partially due to those typical NIMBY politics, not in my backyard. Everybody, of course, supports wind power, but nobody wants to see a wind turbine next to their quaint little town or on top of their mountain. In Bavaria, for example, wind turbines can't even be built anywhere closer than 2 kilometers to the nearest house, and that doesn't leave that much space to build them anywhere. And some of these things are changing because the mood in Germany is changing politically, but also I'm seeing more and more smaller projects that I personally find quite interesting. For example, one project I just came across, farmers now starting to cover their fruit orchards with solar panels. On the one side, of course, that gives protection to the trees from the elements. We've seen, due to climate change, hail and heavy rain more frequently, but also on top of those trees having solar panels, that means while the trees are growing, right above, you can produce enough electricity to power some nearby neighborhoods. So we're seeing a lot of these smaller projects as well. So I would say really firing here on all cylinders to see that we can satisfy all our power needs and become more independent.
Indeed, Lars Holter, energy Deutsche Welle correspondent on that energy update. Many thanks. While talking about climate change, Ukrainians in the western region of Zaparisia Oblast are reeling from an unprecedented drought marked by soaring temperatures, lack of rainfall, which has affected crop production and their livelihoods. The heat wave hit the region since mid-July, with readings on the thermometer frequently rising above 40 degrees Celsius. Yet rains have become a rare occurrence. Due to the low rainfall, villagers have to buy water for the vegetable garden. The price per cube of water is about $4, and that is only enough to water a small garden once a day. As a result, harvests of sunflowers and corn are under threat. Animal husbandry is also taking a hit from the drought. Farmers complain that the milk production from cows is decreasing, the pigs have stopped gaining weight, and chickens are laying fewer eggs. Elon Musk announces SpaceX satellite cell phone partnership, meaning T-Mobile could be on planet Mars. We have more details soon. Welcome back. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the government would be announcing further support next month for consumers struggling with energy bills. Mr. Johnson, who has less than 2 weeks left in office, said that the previous support announced is clearly now going to be augmented with extra cash that his successor's government will announce in September. He adds that any additional support should be targeted at the most vulnerable rather than include the richest households in the country. Britain's energy regulator, Ofgem, said on Friday bills would rise by 80% on average from October.
Well, of course, we could see this coming, and that's why we've put the steps in place that we already have. And don't forget that although there will be more announcements next month, more cash coming from September onwards, you shouldn't forget that the pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. Cash, there's a pipeline of cash coming through over the next few months and through the autumn and the winter. But that is clearly now going to be augmented, increased by extra cash that the government is plainly going to be announcing in September. Now, I want to make a point about what we're doing. We want to target the household. So most of the money will go to the 8 million most vulnerable households. That's the right thing to do. A lot of money will be going to absolutely everybody. But what I don't think we should be doing is trying to cap the whole thing for absolutely everybody, the richest households in the country. This will go on for a few months, and it will go on over the winter, and it will be tough, and I've been very clear about that.
Well, let's now take a listen to UK's National Energy Action, who says Ofgem's decision will be putting millions at risk of fuel poverty. The new average bill for electricity and gas for 24 million households means energy bills will have almost trebled from October last year, when they were an average of £1,277, a major factor in inflation rising to a 40-year high. Chief Executive of the Energy Action, the National Energy Action that is, Adam Scorer, says the new price rise is a disaster that will send 9 million households into fuel poverty, up from 4 million households in September 2021.
The price cap is a cap on the price that energy suppliers can pay for units, can charge for units of energy. It's not a cap on a bill, it's a cap on the unit of energy. We've just heard that it's increased by another 80%, another £750. That's about £2,000 on a bill in a 12-month period. What it means is that an average UK energy bill is going to be around £3,500 when a year ago it was about £1,200. It is simply unaffordable for millions of people in Britain, and it's already caused huge amounts of privation, debt, anxiety, and grief, and it will only get worse as we head into the winter. So across the UK, we have what we call fuel poverty, which is if you have to spend 10% of your income to afford a decent level of heat and power, you're regarded as being in fuel poverty. September 2021, there are about 4 million households across the UK in fuel poverty. This announcement, as we head into October, that's going to jump to about 9 million households, and we know it will get even worse at the next iteration of these price caps in January. And we know that at the height of winter in January, we expect another £1,000 to go on the average UK energy bill. It has exploded our welfare safety net, to be honest. Families just cannot afford anything close to this. It's a disaster.
Well, for Londoners, many have questioned how they might continue to pay their energy bills in the face of an 80% jump in prices. British energy bills will rise on average £3,549 a year from October, plunging millions of businesses into jeopardy unless government steps in. Ofgem said the market was too volatile to forecast the next cap for January, but the conditions in the gas market in winter means prices could get significantly worse through 2023.
But the thing is, we're not sure how it's going to affect us. It's all right, I'm saying it's going up X amount %, but in pound notes, we'll have to wait for the 3-month bill to come in to find out, won't we? And of course, being winter, it's going to affect us more. I mean, in the summer when it went up, it wasn't too bad because we don't use a lot of gas or electric in the summer. So we sort of like we get by that one. But the next one in the winter, when that comes in, I think it's going to shock a lot of people, unfortunately. It's scary.
I'm not really sure. It doesn't seem to have affected us so far, but I think because the weather's been so nice, probably once it starts getting a bit cooler, then we would probably have to worry about how we're going to pay the bills. I mean, we're just on pension, so it will be a worry, I think.
It just has to be a change in lifestyle at this point, you know, just turning on the gas when you can, when it's really necessary, or making sure that all the lights are definitely turned off and so forth. And it just has to be a change in lifestyle, because that's the only way that you'll be able to actually survive it. It's not going to be an increase in wages, I know that for sure. It's not going to be an increase in the income that I get every month or so forth. So it just has to be a change in lifestyle.
Well, joining us now, Dr. Charles Aholo, lecturer at the University of West of England, Bristol, also Deputy Director of the African Natural Resources and Energy Law Network. He joins me now from Bristol. Thank you for joining us. Paint a picture to the rest of the world that do not understand how bad things could get with regards to the soaring energy prices.
Well, at the moment, things are really bad, and they are apocalyptic. They are also apocalyptic at the same time. We have seen a rise in the energy price cap just today, and it is also predicted that this rise of about £3,549 would plunge more than 8.9 million UK households into fuel poverty. And for us to understand the ramifications of fuel poverty is simply when a household has to spend about 10% of their household income to meet the sufficiency of their energy needs. We're saying that at the pace at which the energy price cap is rising, just like the former commentator mentioned, it has gotten to a point, an emergency point where households are crying out, and that the situation would really get really worse from here, and it will affect the quality of life. Not only the quality of life, it will affect every sector of the economy, because energy is the lifeblood of the modern economy. So things are really pretty bad.
Doctor, what specifically can we link this to? How did we get here? Is it the Russia invasion of Ukraine? What else?
No, there are several. I think you cannot only lay it to the Russia invasion of Ukraine. There are several reasons why the UK is here at the moment. First, the UK relies on external sources of energy, and this is really pretty bad. And then the UK also have the problem of poor storage facility for its energy. There was a plant that closed down in 2017, which accounts for 70. That plant alone accounts for 70% of UK storage capacity. That plant is currently short, and then you cannot take out the dynamics of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So just like you are aware, the European Union, for which UK was a member before, the European Union relies on Russia for about 40 to 65% of its energy sources. So it boils down to what I said first. I think this is a direct threat to UK's energy security. And then finally, we also have the illusion that renewable energy and the drive towards net zero can solve our current energy challenges. So despite the enormity of funds that have gone into this, we have not been able to see the direction in which that is leading us, and we are exposed to crisis. We had a situation where UK had to shut down and stop new investments in oil and gas and fossil fuel. And for me, I think that is a regulatory suicide for me. So this cocktail of factors is responsible for why we are where we are at the moment.
What do you think government can do? What kind of incentive to ameliorate the situation for families earning lower incomes and those we're hearing that would enter that poverty line?
First, we need to look at what the law says in relation to incentives. The Warm Home and Energy Conservation Act of 2000 commits the UK government to pursue a strategy that ensures that, so far as reasonably practicable, persons do not live in full poverty. So this is a direct obligation. So how is the government ensuring that it meets this obligation in the UK? First, we need to consider government action with respect to its effectiveness. And so, for me, I think the solution to the problem is a staged approach. One, the emergency response. Government should increase support and direct financing to these low-income households, and then that would take the form of improvement of. Government should also target energy efficiency measures. Now, this requires regulatory vigilance. It requires absolute regulatory vigilance on the part of government, and it requires a buy-in of the local authorities to actually ensure that the houses that are being built are energy efficient. The government should make regulations as to insulation. These regulations are there, but I think government should step up its vigilance, regulatory vigilance. Another thing is policy approach. Government should also ensure that it pursues a dynamic policy that not only promotes energy education, because now we can't be talking about energy efficiency when some households do not understand what energy efficiency is. So there should be policies on ground to ensure that we achieve sufficient education so that people will be properly directed and guided as to the impact of their activities on their energy. And then I think finally, the government can also ensure that there is a cap on energy prices, because the question is that it cannot continue to rise the way it continues to rise. There should be a limit to which energy prices can rise. Indeed. Because if there's no limit, then we will have problems. So that means that government would have to balance the commercial expectations of investors against the necessity of an overdrive in price that will affect the quality of the life of the people of Britain.
All right. Dr. Charles Ahodo is a lecturer at the University of the West of England, Bristol. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for that update.
Thank you.
Well, staying in Britain, since its exit from the European Union, diplomatic spats have occurred between Britain and France over border controls and the management of migrants and asylum seekers. On Thursday, Foreign Secretary and candidate to be the country's next Prime Minister said she was unsure whether French President Emmanuel Macron was friend or foe. Liz Truss said the jury's out when asked the question at a campaign event for the leadership of the ruling Conservative Party.
The jury, President Macron, friend or foe? The jury's out. But if I become Prime Minister, I'll judge him on deeds, not words.
So his actions rather than his statements, she meant. Well, for Mr. Macron, the British people will always be a friend of France. While in Algeria, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, said Britain is an ally of France and its people will always be friends of France, despite the occasional error made by its leaders. He was responding to comments by Liz Truss, the frontrunner to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Let's head now to the United States, where U.S. wireless carrier T-Mobile will be using Elon Musk's owned SpaceX Starlink satellites to provide mobile users with network access in parts of the United States. The company's announced this, outlining plans to connect users' mobile phones directly to satellites in orbit. The new plans, which would exist alongside T-Mobile's existing cellular services, would cut out the need for cell towers and offer service for sending text and images where cell coverage does not currently exist, key for emergency situations in remote areas. Starlink satellites will use T-Mobile's mid-band spectrum to create a new network. Most phones used by the company's customers will be compatible with the new service.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? This really is a big deal. It's a great question to ask because, yeah, even if an entire region or country was lost connectivity because of a severe, hurricane or floods or fires or tornadoes, earthquakes. There's so many natural disasters, obviously. You would actually still have, even if all the cell towers were taken out, your phone would still work.
And Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz says he would emphasize the need to make sure Iran never gains nuclear weapons in his meeting with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Mr. Gantz traveled to the United States to discuss security cooperation between Israel, the U.S., and countries in the Middle East amid efforts to revive Tehran's nuclear deal with world powers. He says Israel's cooperation with CENTCOM and the countries of the region is a game changer for security, stability, and peace in the region, particularly in facing Iran and its proxies.
The need Israel's cooperation with CENTCOM and the countries of the region is a game changer for security, stability, and peace in the region, particularly in facing Iran and its proxies. We will continue to deepen our cooperation, expand our activities against Iranian proxies, and make sure that Iran never gains a nuclear weapon. We are all aware of the need to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear umbrella that will expedite its malign activities and aggressiveness action in the region. This will also be the message that I will convey during my visit to Washington and in my upcoming meeting with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
Into diplomatic relations, U.S. envoy Gabriel Escobar says he hopes tensions in Kosovo's north will not escalate, adding that both Belgrade and Pristina have committed to refraining from violence. He adds that he expects Kosovo to come with proposals to work around constitutional limitations. Pristina says it prevents them from implementing parts of the agreement. Mediator talks over the status of ethnic Serbs in Kosovo have failed to ease tensions fueled by a dispute over car number plates between Belgrade and authorities in Pristina. After a bloody war in late 1990s, predominantly ethnic Albanian Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 2008, something Belgrade, with the backing of China, Russia, and 5 EU member states, refuses to recognize.
I expect that by the end of the month, based on the commitments of both parties and the hard work of the special representative for the European Union, that we will find a way to move forward in a peaceful manner. Beyond that, the dialogue is still continuing to look for options on the broader pictures. But to get there, one of the most important parts of our plan and our hope and our aspiration is that all previously agreed elements of the dialogue and the agreement must be implemented, including the Association of Serb Municipalities. That was a message that we gave the Kosovo government quite clearly 2 days ago. It's a message that the Secretary of State gave to President Osmani and Prime Minister Kurti during their visit to Washington recently. And it's one that we'll continue to insist on. And in the meantime, we'll continue to insist on the parties using the dialogue as the primary dispute resolution mechanism. Additionally, we've told the parties that we're prepared to help them create positive outcomes for anything that they agree to in the dialogue, either through political support, technical assistance, or economic support. So that's what we are going to do within the context of this issue. And I should add that I have said repeatedly that the future of the Western Balkans is as full members of the European Union. So we'll continue to push that. But the dialogue is important in that process as well.
Still to come on the program. Well, despite the increased prices on food, the Belgian appetite for French fries is undisturbed. We have more in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. And back to our story in the US, where the US wireless carrier T-Mobile will be using Elon Musk's Starlink's SpaceX satellites to provide mobile users with network access in parts of the United States. Olushola Amuson is an artificial intelligence evangelist. He joins us from Dallas. Thank you for joining us. Help us break this down. How is this expected to play out?
Thanks for the opportunity. So essentially, wireless communications are supported by massive base stations in the name of masts that are actually terrestrial. That means they're on the planet. So all of those technologies that have been invented in telecommunications the last, 5 decades are seeming not to be sufficient to be able to ensure coverage to last mile areas. So think about areas of the United States, which many people don't know actually do exist, where there are issues with coverage, either as a result of the fact that there has not been enough, infrastructure development in those areas, or because of temporary outages due to disasters. So this partnership between T-Mobile and Elon Musk Starlink is to make sure that regardless of what is happening on the planet as a spacefaring civilization that Elon Musk envisions the world to be, we need to partner with local telcos. And when we say local now, we're referring to Earth as local, to be able to make sure that in perpetuity, there can be access to telecommunications services, even if there was something as catastrophic as a, as a tsunami or as a earthquake, or that is of very great degrees. If all the masts are gone and all the fiber optics are affected, all the traditional things that telecommunication is essentially built on, when they face challenges, can we connect to satellites that are already in space to increase the amount of coverage to places where there has not been access but also places that have been temporarily affected by these natural disasters.
And indeed, one perhaps clear example is also what we heard Elon Musk provide for Ukraine in the situation of Russia's invasion, which was Starlinks and the satellite. Do we know how that is performing currently with the war still on?
Yeah, I mean, the essential thing there is when there are, challenges between nations, especially if a nation is responsible for providing, telecommunication and internet services to another nation that is sort of subservient or still developing. If there are challenges between them, like we saw in the scenario of Ukraine, you would need interventions, like that of Starlink that can provide this other country that can essentially provide these telco infrastructures with something that is, not terrestrial, something that is, celestial, something that is out of this world, literally, so that's still working fine because they provided it as a service to just make sure that, troops in Ukraine are able to still communicate with the rest of the world because they were essentially cut off, by the service providers from Russia, so essentially, if you had a scenario where a country is getting help from another country or by virtue of the fact that their service providers are all from another country. Let me give you an example. Like most Nigerian companies actually host, their data and servers with like foreign companies whose data centers are everywhere else around the world other than Nigeria. Should we have a scenario where there is war or there's crisis, the governments of those countries can essentially instruct their own, entrepreneurs and their own corporations not to provide those services on an ongoing basis to the other country that they're in war with or they're at war with. So essentially, you need service like that, Elon Musk, that is actually not particularly governed because there is no government in space just yet. I mean, there are guidelines around how to use like space, international space stations, the alliances by NASA. Essentially, Starlink itself is allowed to operate as a U.S. corporation. But as a billionaire and as a corporation, Elon Musk and Starlink and all his affiliations can essentially provide this kind of services on an ongoing basis. And it made sense because also the United States was in support of Ukraine for that particular scenario. So what you will see as time goes on is that other, space companies would begin to maybe partner with AT&T or partner with other telcos like Orange and all of that and sort of see how that can happen. The real question I always have is for a continent like ours, what are we doing to be able to make sure that should we have a country that is, at war with us or that's not interested in our growth as we would, do we have these infrastructures in place to be able to position ourselves to continue to be, an independent sovereign civilization?
Well, if I might attempt to answer that, I would say our bright minds are listening right now, and I'm sure they are working on a number of things. But let me quickly ask you, and this is in terms of pricing for this text messages and this beta phase. Do you think it would be pricey or it would be the same as regular texting and, with the mobile device?
Yeah, as with most corporations, I mean, most of the plans haven't yet been unveiled, but as with most corporations, like there will be a way to set it up as like a premium service. Basically, this will work a lot for businesses, especially those who are establishing campuses in areas that are not particularly urban, right? And I mean, it won't be a problem for these enterprises to be able to afford, that. But for the common man who maybe you're driving across from you're driving through like the desert of a certain desert in the United States, or you're driving cross country patches where normally you wouldn't have this service. Perhaps, the goal would be to be able to augment, the service delivery in some of those areas. What I really see is how T-Mobile can make this a bigger competitive advantage against its other competitors and essentially make the users of T-Mobile feel more comfortable that wherever they go or whatever happens, they will still be able to have their service. So I see them bundling it as a service with the existing service, but maybe selling it at a higher price to enterprises who definitely would need that to continue to carry on their businesses. But a little is known right now about what those pricing schedules will look like. It definitely costs them a lot to be able to make that partnership happen, and they'll be looking to recoup that in one way or the other over the next couple of years.
We appreciate your time and expertise on the program. Olushola Amusan is an artificial intelligence evangelist joining us from Texas. Thanks again.
It's a pleasure.
To all the stories now. Moderna said it is using Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech, or rather it is suing them for patent infringement linked to the development of the first COVID-19 vaccines. The US biotech company is alleging that mRNA technology it developed before the pandemic was copied. The lawsuit, which is seeking unspecified financial damages, was filed in the US and Germany. Pfizer said it was surprised by the action and would vigorously defend itself against the allegations. So far this year, 1 million people have died from COVID-19. That's according to WHO's chief, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who said 2.5 years into the pandemic, we have all the tools necessary to prevent these deaths. He's asking all governments to strengthen their efforts to vaccinate all health workers, older people and others at the highest risk on the way to 70% vaccine coverage for the whole population. He adds that some countries with the lowest vaccination rates are now making up ground, especially in Africa.
We cannot say we're learning to live with COVID-19 when 1 million people have died with COVID-19 this year alone. When we are at 2.5 years into the pandemic and have all the tools necessary to prevent these deaths. Once again, we ask all governments to strengthen their efforts to vaccinate all health workers, older people, and others at the highest risk on the way to 70% vaccine coverage for the whole population. It's pleasing to see that some countries with the lowest vaccination rates are now making up ground, especially in Africa. It's especially pleasing to see that coverage of high-priority groups is improving, with many countries making impressive progress towards vaccinating 100% of health workers and 100% of older people.
The Belgians' appetite for French fries appeared to be undisturbed by increased prices, as Europe's blistering hot summer is forecast to reduce the output of the country's potato farmers. Potatoes, a staple for households, whether bought fresh or as prepared items, such as fries or crisps, are among summer crops like corn to have suffered from record temperatures and the worst drought in Europe in 500 years. Bernard, who heads the Belgian National Union of Fries Makers, said the average price of the delicacy already increased by up to 30% since the start of the year, notably due to the high cost of cooking oil, soaring energy prices in the context of inflation rates not seen in half a century.
I think that 2022 we already had 1 to 2 increases, yes, of 10-15 cents for a cone, which makes 20 to 30 in less than a year, which is quite a lot. And we are not used to that type of price increases. And what I feel is that, especially when you receive your energy bill, people wake up and say, oh, those 30 cents were not enough. And that a third increase might occur. Yes, I think so. It is emotionally very, very difficult to accept that what is so personal to the Belgian, his fries, is going to increase in price. Anyhow, even if it increases 10 or 20%, you still have a meal for let's say €3. Which is still affordable.
I don't really consume French fries often, so for me it's like an extra. I don't think it's gonna be a big impact, but with all other prices, yes, I totally agree that it is awful, but I don't know if we can influence it in any way.
So I think it will kind of have an effect on the restaurants here as well, because maybe they will order less, and then they will order less drinks, so it's not good for the economy of the kind of this place.
And now I have an appetite. Well, that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.